Welcome everybody out there listening to KLEAN Radio, especially those on our new station in Portland, Oregon, FM News 101 KXL.
That's exciting.
How cool is that, Portland, Oregon? It's cool, Andrew. Andrew Spanswick, everybody out there that's new listening to the show tonight, is my co-host with the most. He's been in the industry of treating people and helping people for over 23 years. It used to be 22
keeps growing
years.
Like a year every week.
You know, we got to be accurate here as we are on this show, but there's a show to people that are new, that are listening, about addiction and recovery, where we talk about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and everything in between when it comes to addiction.
Absolutely, and we welcome Portland. It's nice to have a new station ad, and we have an exciting show today. Why don't you tell everybody who our guests are, Judah?
But before I do that, I just wanted to say, you know, to the people in Portland, I was really excited actually when we decided, when we got Portland, is that I've been in Portland and I was horrified a little bit by the amount of teenagers and the amount of people that were homeless on the street. You know, obviously products, some of them of addiction, some of them of mental illness. And I really thought it was, and to the people out there that are listening in Portland, whether it's your son, your brother, if somebody in your family is struggling, and that's one of the things we talk about on this show, there is hope. And, give us a call tonight. The number here is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Andrew, so...
it's interesting. Portland, we have a hospital up in Long Beach, Washington, and we get about 60% of our clients from Portland. So we're really happy to have Portland on the air here. And also, Portland's one of those cities. It's a destination city for a lot of youth and people that run away and people that have drug problems. So there's a lot. Hopefully we'll get a lot of interaction with people from Portland now that we're live there.
And from everybody else, we haven't forgotten about you. And
that's right.
But we're gonna be in Portland happy tonight. But that doesn't mean we still don't love you. And but one of the things I did want to talk about last night, we started covering it last week on the show, is the amount of that concert in New York, the festival where 4 people died, the Zoo Festival of MDMA, aka known as Molly, and it really bothered me. And it bothered me that there are people dying. There are so many teenagers, so many young people in America that are taking this drug, taking an extremely dangerous drug. And I was joking last week, and I was sort of jokingly saying all the people that go to Trader Joe's and then are so careful about what they put in their system, or go to Whole Foods and then have no problem putting ecstasy in their system. It's like, okay, I'm healthy in every which way, but I'm going to take ecstasy.
Well, I think it's common for people about drugs. They have a certain level of denial. They'll be the first people to, like you said, eat healthy or whatever. But then, even when it comes to something like antibiotics, sometimes they'll be like, oh, no, I don't want to take it.
I don't want to put that in my system.
Right. It's like, okay, you have bronchitis. You really need antibiotics. But, the same thing with illegal drugs, always organic. Like, really, there's not paraquat sprayed all over marijuana and all sorts of other pesticides. It's like, give me a break.
Right.
So,
that's actually a story. Because they're right. They'll only eat organic strawberries, but they have no problem taking ecstasy. And it's a very dangerous drug.
In marijuana, we used to come up from Mexico. It was covered in DDT and paraquat. Nobody gave it,
Before we get our guests, why don't you explain to people out there that are listening that don't know what ecstasy is? And I mean, they know what ecstasy is because they hear it by the name.
Well, ecstasy is no longer what it used to be. I mean, MDMA is the base root drug of all the sort of class of hallucinogens that are sort of called ecstasy colloquially. Molly is another now new term for that class of hallucinogen. But the reality is that MDMA is made from a rare oil from one type of tree in South America, which now is basically surrounded by guards because the tree's becoming extinct. So instead of being able to use MDMA, most of the legal drugs, as they call them in Britain, companies, is all these companies throughout Europe, especially Amsterdam and places like that, where they actually make synthetic drugs. And every time they become illegal, they change up a couple different molecules, and then they call it something else and they put it out there. One of the invasions we've seen of that here recently in the U.S. is bath salts, but now we're seeing it in different forms of ecstasy as well. So Molly is really just a marketing term for the most part. It's very rare that people actually get true MDMA anymore. In most forms of ecstasy, and there's websites, if people really want to go look, that will show you all the different pills that are out there. You can actually send a pill in and they'll analyze it for you and tell you what's in it. and then they list them on the website so people can actually see what they're taking. So from a public health standpoint, I guess that's good. But from the reality is it should show people that are exposed to like a random tab of ecstasy or some powder that they're being told is Molly. Is the reality is that isn't what it is for the most part. It's normally heroin or a bunch of cuts with amphetamines, and they come up with some mixture that mimics what ecstasy used to do.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. We actually have a great show tonight. One of my favorite past guests is back in the studio. His name is Jeff Nalin, Dr. Jeff Nalin, and he's owner, co-owner of an amazing facility for youth adolescents called Paradigm. He's brought with him tonight his main psychiatrist, Steve Sager. Sager. I thought I said
it's only the third name he's ever gotten wrong in the show. So.
That is actually only the third name, but I thought Steve Sager.
The consequences have been bad generally, though.
And but you guys, I mean, you've been on the show before, Jeff, and I came down to your facility a couple weeks ago. It's in Malibu. You guys treat adolescents, which is teenagers, and it's a pretty amazing place. And
thanks.
So we're talking about MDMA tonight. Obviously, I'm sure you have many of your clients, since you're treating adolescents, are abusing.
We do. Unfortunately. And what Andrew was saying is exactly right, that, people are talking about Molly, they're using Molly, and there's such a variety of types and purities and all kinds of stuff that, you never know exactly what you're using. And they do sort of use those things to mimic the euphoric kind of feeling, and it can be mixed with all kinds of things from, whether it's methamphetamines or laxatives or all the other things that, are cut into those things.
By the way, there's nothing better than taking a bunch of laxatives and methamphetamine at the same time.
Right. You're going to the bathroom fast. And but has it been on the rise, or is it just more in the news? I mean, because, Andrew, you're constantly saying it's really not much has changed. It's just...
I mean, ecstasy was huge, right? I mean, it really broke out in Britain through the club scene, and then came to the U.S. Most of it was made in, like I said, Eastern Europe. And it's very, we used to actually be, MDA was actually legal. You used to be able, in the 80s, you could go into, I remember walking into a drugstore in Berkeley and you could buy 30 tabs off the pharmacy shelf, and it was used for therapy mostly. People were using it in group therapy and couples therapy because it gave the sense of bliss and empathy towards other people. I always thought it was kind of a joke because it's like, while you're on it, it's great. As soon as you get off it, you're back to hating your spouse. But,
Right. But isn't that one of the things? And let's talk about that a little bit. A lot of people don't realize that you take ecstasy, it releases something, and it creates this amazing euphoric thing, and then the next day,
it's more bliss than euphoria was the key sort of trademark of ecstasy. Right. And it really gave you a true feeling of bliss, which is a very rare sort of feeling for generally people to get. Most people only get it that are like very involved in religion and meditate or like whatever. It's very hard to just feel a genuine feeling of bliss because you have to block out so many other feelings.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And but ecstasy would target that, so you would get this incredibly blissful, euphoric experience. But as I said, as the oils from these trees have dried up, there is very little MDMA out there anymore. So, and it's so much cheaper for these companies to just create synthetic drugs that mimic the effects. I mean, why go and try and squeeze the oil out of a tree in South America when you can come up with a chemical batch of junk and have it mimic the basic thing? So you get a lot of methamphetamine in there, which is cheap to produce. You get a lot of heroin in there. There's a lot of other pseudo psychedelics that are in there as well.
Is it addictive?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what you're taking,
right.
The same thing's called a bunch of different things. And, you asked earlier, what our youth are using and how it's changed over time. And there's really sort of a rhythm to it that it shifts and something gets popular. And a lot, we were talking before the show started about how, that there's a lot of influence from the media and the music industry, that if some song gets hot and there's something in it, like there has been recently, all of a sudden people are talking about it and asking about it, and it's spreading around parties. And so you see a spike in the use of with the young people that we see. But there's sort of an ebb and flow. Sometimes it's like all of a sudden heroin's back and a lot of the opiates are back, and then they sort of disappear for a while. And right now it's a lot of the methamphetamines and the ecstasy is floating around.
By the way, if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. If you'd like to talk about this tonight, give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. We're in the studio tonight with owner and operator of Paradigm Rehab Treatment Center, youth adolescent place in Malibu, and Steve Sager. So what did I say, Steve?
You said Steve Sager.
I did say Steve Sager, yeah. And
we're only recording.
And the reason I say this is because there's a Steve Dissager. I thought that's might have been what I said, but it's not Steve Sager. Thank you. And you're a psychiatrist. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is because I think a lot of people a lot of times don't see the downfall of taking these drugs. Now, you being a psychiatrist, you're obviously you're working with Jeff. What are some of the what?
Not working on Jeff, working with Jeff.
Working with Jeff.
It's an important distinction.
Yeah. What is some of the aftermath of using ecstasy?
Well, by the time they see me, I see a lot of dysphoria, depression, sadness. I can see some hallucinations, some psychotic behaviors, some irritability, the whole gamut. And it's often difficult to know exactly what's going on underneath it all. As a psychiatrist, I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out if it's the drugs or they're trying to treat something underlying it with the drugs, and it is difficult to know. I'd say the most common would be dysphoria and just feeling sad and down. Yeah,
a lot of that's from the come down of ecstasy too, and since it has like a lot of things like methamphetamine in it, a lot of people that have cocaine problems will take ecstasy and it stops them from using cocaine for a little while. We see this also with other hallucinogens like ibogaine and stuff like that, where it temporarily blocks the craving for certain other drugs. Unfortunately, it all returns after a period of time, but it's another thing where it's just tilting your brain chemistry in another way. And I think when you talk about, whether something is addictive or not, it's not just whether it's addictive, it's like what damage are you doing when you're using it, and especially at a young age where your brain's still developing and a lot's going on. Not that when your brain's sort of decaying like all of ours, that's a good idea to start messing with it either. But, we see this a lot where people actually have psychotic breaks. People have a propensity to some sort of mental illness. Even a small amount of these drugs will bring an onset where normally it wouldn't come out for possibly years or even ever. So it's sort of like we see that, like we talk about people going in the military and a certain amount will break and they'll have PTSD and a certain amount won't. Some people have a lower threshold for the ability to handle a certain kind of stressors. And drugs, especially psychedelics and amphetamines, can bring that out, can bring out especially psychosis and depression. Obviously, we see that a lot with alcohol and with just even, marijuana causes all sorts of problems as well, anxiety disorders. And
one of the things you bring up that I have discussions with a lot of youth a lot of times is that when they're starting these drugs, and they're pretty significant drugs really early on, they start to get the idea, and this is, part of the addiction question, what's physically addictive versus psychologically addictive, is that they start to feel that the only time they feel good is during these things, and that's been their experience. So they have this mindset, many of them have a mindset of like, this is just a good feeling and there's nothing wrong with it and it's the only place that I get it. And that's where a real psychological addiction can take hold, and especially because they're so young.
So right, and also it forms their identity. It's part of their identity formation. Instead of having a normal identity formation where they have a sense of self that's positive and that will last throughout their lives, they associate all their feelings about sex, about gender, about their life in general around the use of that drug.
Yeah, and then treatment becomes about getting them to buy into the idea that let's stabilize you in some way and get rid of some of this dysphoria, but also start to realize that you can get some of these things that these drugs were giving you, this good feeling.
The real high, the natural high.
Yeah, and it's, when you're 14, 15, it's like, it's a tough sell. It's like, this is way easier just to, go buy this.
Right.
But when you see people starting to have that reaction, that they're starting to identify things and talk about things and actually connecting with people in a real way, and feeling better, that's when treatment really starts to take hold. And but that beginning process is so difficult. I mean,
do you think it's a tough sell because it's hard when you're 15? We had a caller a couple weeks ago that was trying to convince us that you can't be an alcoholic at 22, you can't be a drug addict at 22. Now you're dealing with 15, 16-year-old kids that are in the midst of a major crisis, a major addiction. Yeah. And how many parents out there just think it's a phase?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents do think it's a phase, but I don't look at it from the strict addiction standpoint. My goal for them in the end is to be happy, free-thinking people, and you can be miserable and not free-thinking way before 20 and 15. Right. And if your upbringing has been such that the world just seems like a tough place and it's not to be trusted, that's what you want to impact, because that's a recipe for wanting to check out. And so you have to get them to a point where this is all just about getting happy. How do we get happy and comfortable in our own skin? And you're in the midst of developing your own identity for the first time. And how do you do that? Because that's a big payoff in the long term.
Yeah, I think a lot of the ideas about doing drugs and then whether or not you're addicted or not really isn't the point. The point is that they're doing these things and then they have all these rationalizations as to why it's okay.
Right.
And it's not really okay, and it's going to lead you down a path that they may not be addicted. They might just be abusing at 16, but if they're going to keep on that path, it's not going to help.
Right.
Right. And so it's showing people that you don't actually have to identify fully as an addict.
Yeah.
You just have to identify that you're engaging in this behavior that's dysfunctional and doesn't have a good outcome. Nobody does cocaine every day and ends up being great.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not sort of the general outcome.
We're going to get the one call where the guy tries to prove
hey, I'm great.
as he's driving, down
so I say call me another 9 years.
We've actually had those callers too, driving, telling us how, years of addiction has been okay with them.
And I take a realistic view too, that it's a tremendous number, a huge percentage of the youth that we serve that are regular pot smokers, that smoke weed. A lot of them do it because they have developed an underlying anxiety issue. And the truth is it works. It helps with anxiety. The problem is that it doesn't work long term.
And it stops working.
It stops working after a while, and you have to just sort of expand your repertoire. It's like, okay, if you have anxiety all the time, let's develop 15 things versus just
I got to take my Valium before I smoke my pot.
Right.
And by the way, if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. We're talking a little bit about tonight about MDMA, Molly, and the effects it has on people. But I got to tell you, and so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. One of the things I actually get really sad about, and I wanted to talk about it, because I was watching this festival, I was watching the pictures, and it's supposed to be this music festival. And I got to tell you, to the people out there listening, I've been sober a long time, coming up on 15 years in October. And I got to tell you, one of the greatest things, I went recently to a Killers concert with my girlfriend. I waited 9 hours online so I could stand general admission.
He's addicted to his girlfriend.
I'm addicted to my girlfriend, yes. But I stood 9 hours online, and I got up front, and when the Killers came out, and I had the greatest time in my life. I remember it. I'll always remember it. And one of the things I remember when I was drinking, I'd go to concerts. I don't remember a single thing. Right. I rolled down the hill at a Who concert. Good times.
Well, you remember that.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like I watch all these people, and I'm thinking you're missing out on the fun. Because if you need drugs to listen to music, the music's probably not that good, which I've always said about the Dead. And I hope not to offend anybody out there, because every Deadhead needed to be high. How good could the music be? But, Steve, and that's one of the things. It's really a hard sell with teenagers. Yeah. Because so much of their recall is going to those shows drunk, going to it's like seeing things, everything like that.
Yeah, and I think, I know Steve can speak to this too, but, I don't usually take, a slam the front door down kind of approach. It's like some things are, meaningful to the young people and what they're doing. And for me, it's about if there's issues with your family or if there's issues inside yourself that you're not happy with, I'm just all about how do we tackle those in new and different ways? Because we know where this road goes to, but even if you're still really holding on to that for a period of time, let's figure some stuff out that's going to give you some other avenues for later on. So, especially, it's always with weed, that you get into that, it's not addictive, it's a plant, it's natural. It's like, it's fine. It's just, if that was really going to make everything great, then you should be really great by now. But, it's not. Right. So let's just figure something, some extra stuff out, and you're eventually going to have to go home and make those decisions later. And we're just trying to instill some other ways of doing some of these things. And a lot of it's about accessing your emotions and being able to deal with it.
But I think it's also important because both you and Andrew are parents, and I don't know what you've done, Jeff, but I know what Andrew has done. But I think that's a big problem a lot of parents have, is they think, oh, because I did it, it's okay for my kid to do it, not realizing that the drugs, because sometimes, the list of what you've spoken about, what they do to ecstasy, and the marijuana today being 50 to 60% stronger than it was, 20 years ago, I don't think parents are realizing that what the dangers are.
Well, it's interesting because, some of just from my own experience and some of the research I've read, we've really gotten to parents to talk about things like weed. 81% of parents will sit and have that conversation, but only about 12 to 14% of them have those same conversations about prescription drugs. And you know, the terrain's changed a lot, and it's changing all the time really quickly. So it's just helping parents understand what the terrain is out there and not just raging against it, but just knowing this is what they're dealing with on a daily basis.
What's amazing, you're saying that prescription drug abuse among teens, 24% of high school students, that's 5 million abused prescription drugs medication. That's of 2012. That's 5 million kids. That's a lot of kids that are abusing prescription drugs.
It's the thing that's changed the game, I think, in the last 10 years. I mean, we call them, Generation RX, because they have grown up with prescriptions as a major part of their lives, whether it's psychotropic meds from an early time that they're getting prescribed for different disorders, whether they're real or not, and there's a lot of prescription med abuse out there. I mean,
all Ritalin and Concerta and all of that. Adderall, all the ADD
and it's amazing
drugs.
how commonplace it is for people to snort these drugs. They could be in their 20s in medical school.
Well, that's how a lot of people actually end up doing coke. Is they start snorting Ritalin and then they're like, oh, there's this thing called cocaine, and that's so we see a lot of that. But
yeah, now with the internet, there's lots of stuff that shows that people, 15-year-olds will go online to order stuff, and they'll be able to say things like, I'm 15 and I'm using my dad's credit card and I need this, and they'll still go through. And so there's real easy access to stuff now.
Well, the easiest access is still through the parents.
That's true.
Even though the internet is,
or the grandmother.
Even though the internet is out there and they can use their parents' credit card to pay for whatever they want, they don't even need a prescription to get it.
Yeah.
Or they're even asked about it, but most of it still comes from the parents or grandparents or somebody that they know.
Yeah.
Chuck Palahniuk wrote that book, Invisible Monsters, and it's about a group of guys and girls that go around and they go to realtors and they just tour houses just to go in the medicine cabinets of all the houses that are for sale.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of scams out there.
And by the way, if you just tuned in,
drugs.
you're listening to Clean Radio, and one of the things Andrew and I always like to say is we're not a show against these things. We're just a show that, in case it's gone a little bit too far for you, there are places to get help. We understand some people could smoke pot recreationally. We know a lot of people could drink recreationally. We're not part of that. We're not the temperance movement here. But we are a movement that's saying to people, if it gets too much, give us a call. And we have Jeff Nalin in from Paradigm tonight, and an amazing youth adolescent treatment facility. We have Steve Sager, who's a psychiatrist there, who Jeff tells me is one of the most normal psychiatrists he's ever met. We have Andrew Spanswick, who's one of the best professionals you'll ever meet in this field, who's been treating people and helping people.
And we have Judah that remembers everyone's name.
Everybody's name perfectly well. One of the things I want to talk about when we come back from the break, because somebody asked me today, can you die from alcohol detox? And I want to talk about that after the break. If you just tuned in, you're listening to Clean Radio.
Cool.
Are you or someone you care about addicted to drugs or alcohol? Addiction ruins lives and destroys families. Bring an end to the pain and suffering by calling KLEAN Treatment Centers. KLEAN has helped people from around the world break free by not only treating the addiction, but the underlying causes and providing vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean with no gimmicks and no false promises. If you need immediate assistance or just have questions, call KLEAN Treatment Centers for guidance. A much better life awaits.
Welcome back to Clean Radio. We have a great show going on tonight. We have Jeff Nalin from Paradigm and Steve Sager from Paradigm. It's a treatment center in Malibu that treats adolescents. And I want to tell everybody out there that's listening, I went and checked this place out. It is absolutely stunning. I didn't want to leave your facility.
Oh, thanks.
Because it's got the coolest property I've ever seen.
We could have kept you there for 30 days.
I wouldn't mind, Andrew. There's plenty of room on the property.
Did you get to eat a meal there, too?
I didn't get a chance to eat a meal. And that's how good it is if I recommend it without even eating. But one of the things, by the way, I want to welcome to all our new listeners in Portland. We're talking about recovery. We're talking about addiction. But one of the things I want to, and we're all in the field in a sense, and I think a lot of us take for granted sometimes that things are obvious, and when I think things aren't obvious, and we have these shows on TV that show people detoxing on national television, and not done very safely. And somebody asked me today, can you die from alcohol detox? And of course, we all know, yes, you can. But we don't realize sometimes there's so many people out there that don't know this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that it's shocking to parents sometimes when, you know, when youth come in and they've been abusing benzodiazepines or alcohol a lot, and I tell parents that those are the ones that are the dangerous ones that make me nervous.
Those are the ones that scare me.
They're surprised by that.
And seizures and the other thing is so many people die of accidents. I mean, you just go into an emergency room on any given weekend, and it's like, not to do a football analogy there, but on football season, but you know, it just reeks of alcohol. You know, it's like alcohol still is a primary problem in our country, and most people that overdose on a multitude of things. And then when you're coming off alcohol and benzodiazepines, there's a huge risk of seizures.
Explain to people what that is, though, because I think, again, we say benzodiazepines. What is that?
So that's Valium, Ativan, Xanax, Klonopin.
So basically the things people are just popping before they get on a plane.
They're tranquilizers.
Sleep.
Yeah, they're tranquilizers. They're, you know, or hypnotics. There's some hypnotics that are similar, but mostly it's tranquilizers, and anxiety medication.
So these are things you can die from.
Or if you're in the Gulf South, nerve medication, as they call it.
By the way, give us a call. The number here is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Have you seen a lot of teenagers, guys, that are detoxing from alcohol, that are detoxing from drugs, that need detox?
We do.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I mean, some of it is because, you know, when people are starting to use, I mean, we've had 15-year-old kids that were really severe alcoholics, and some of it just started because they didn't really know how much to drink, you know? So it's like you make a glass, right, of vodka, and so you start to really build up some tolerance. And then if you mix any of these meds into it, if you start mixing some of the benzos into it just to get the extra effect, it starts to become really dangerous. And, you know, it's, you know, Steve happens to be very good with those youth and helping them get through it.
Well, I think there is still a thought amongst parents and older people and insurance companies particularly that teens can't become addicted and become dependent and have withdrawal symptoms, but they can, and we see it every day. And alcohol and benzodiazepines, which actually are related because they're both depressants, those are the ones that scare me the most.
Yeah, the irony is that actually, you know, Valium will detox you from alcohol. So, you know, the fact that they're
because they're related.
Yeah. And so it's funny though that, you know, people are using things and they don't realize that it's like you take Valium and then you drink and you have a synergistic effect between the two, and it's just compounding. So it's a real problem. And then, you know, things like Valium, which have a very, very long half-life, meaning that how long it takes to get out of your system. If you take it for a long, long time, you're building up a huge amount of it in your body, and that's what happens is that when you come off of it, and it's one of the hardest detoxes, I think, probably is benzodiazepines.
I totally 100% agree, and it's what scares me as a child and adolescent psychiatrist.
I mean, the amount of anxiety it brings up, and it triggers everything for the person that's on it. It's just a very, very difficult psychologically and physically drug to get off of.
You know, you brought up something very interesting, Steve, because, you know, with insurance companies not wanting, you know, to admit that teens could have a problem, I think all you guys are in a field where insurance companies aren't exactly advertising that that their insurance will pay if you need help. And I think a lot of people out there that are driving around don't realize that insurance does cover this stuff.
Some do.
Some do, right. But I think it's, you know, most doctors, you just assume, you go with the assumption that they accept some form of insurance or another. But this is one of those things the insurance company might not necessarily want you to know. You
know, one of the things that I think is helpful about what we do and what other treatment centers do, some that take insurance, is that we help people get through that hurdle of figuring out what benefits are available. It's much more complicated than people understand. You know, you actually have to call and get pre-certification, and then there's utilization review, which means you have to constantly check with the insurance company to make sure that you're meeting their criteria for the person to be admitted. And that's why we end up giving a lot of free care away, because sometimes we'll just bring people in because we know they're desperate for help, and then we'll flip a coin hoping that their insurance will pay or not pay. And then also often insurance doesn't keep people long enough, and so we'll keep them afterwards and swallow that cost because it's important, you know, and that's what we do. So, but, you know, we're that kind of resource where you can reach out, and if you have any kind of benefits, we can help you get through that really maze of, you know, and a lot of these people, you'll call them up and they'll say you don't have benefits, and that's not true. So there's something called EOBs, explanation of benefits, and most people don't even know they have those. You know?
No, it's completely right, because nobody, you know, insurance companies don't want to advertise that they're going to help. You know, they want you not to really be.
They want to do the opposite.
Right. They want to make it as hard as it humanly possible for you to get to that doctor you need sometimes, so they don't have to
even when
spend
it's
the
actually
money.
against their long-term interest, which is always one of the greatest irony for me. I mean, one of the best things you can do is get preventative or early care, and yet insurance companies are driven really solely by the straight costs. And we saw this in the psychiatric industry back when I used to run 9 psychiatric hospitals, and it was all about shortening the length of stay, and we saw a drop from 90 days down to like 3 to 4 days.
Right.
So now acute care psych, like if you, let's say your spouse tries to kill themselves with an overdose of benzodiazepines, since we're on that topic today, right? And they'll probably get 3 to 4 days in an acute care psych ward, and then they're going to come out, and all they're going to be do is medical stabilization, and maybe put them on a medication so that they're sort of numb. But it's that aftercare or that longer-term care. And one of the nice things about rehabs with the dual diagnosis program is that you can bring people in for the primary substance abuse problem, but then you can also treat the underlying psychiatric disorders with a longer length of stay.
Which is what KLEAN does, which is what Paradigm does.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no hardcore, substance abusing, chemically dependent person that's not a dual diagnosis case. And so it's exactly what we do. And navigating families through that process. It's a complicated process, but it's really simple. The insurance companies want to spend as little money as possible, and there's lots of evidence that the people who say no get bonuses the more they say no. Right. So you have to just... it's why, working together with Steve for so long has been really helpful, because we sort of can tag team people a lot, and when we just know how to justify what people need. There's a lot of...
I think that's important to choose a rehab that's been around for a while, because they know the utilization review people, all the insurance companies, they have a relationship with them by this point.
Right.
And then, they actually know what they can get and what they can't get by different EOBs and different insurance companies.
Yeah. And the reason I think it's so important to talk about, because when I was 20 going to rehab, my parents had that person fighting for me, and he was this guy, his name was Izzy in New York, and he was missing a nostril because he had done so much cocaine. But if not for Izzy losing all the cartilage, he was my parents.
One nostril Izzy?
One nostril Izzy. He was my parents, person that was fighting for them, that I can't think of that word right now. But
advocating.
He was my parents' advocate. By the way, if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio, give us a call. Let us be your advocate. 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Let's go to Jeff calling from Silver Lake. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Jeff.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good. How's it going, Jeff?
All right. Doing well. I love your guys' show, and I just wanted to share my experience with you guys. I used ecstasy in many different forms for years. I've been a drug addict since I was 14. I finally got clean at 38.
Clean with a K.
I'm celebrating 5 years clean.
Great.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and so ecstasy was great while it lasted, but come down was just horrible, and I would just, the stretches of depression and dysphoria and just that morose feeling would just continue on and on for longer and longer stretches, and then, I would have to supplement my intake with methamphetamine, and then it just became just cycles of ecstasy and methamphetamine, and then methamphetamine just kind of dominated everything and took over eventually.
Right.
But, it took me a really long time just to reach some kind of, equilibrium, emotionally, mentally, and it took a lot of work. It took a lot of meetings. It took a lot of people helping me. It took my family. And then it took my sponsor and really working with somebody. And one of the first things that really clicked that my sponsor taught me is and I really believe it, in that for my drug use, for me, a lot of it amounted to was that the drugs for me perpetuated this lie that I was a human being trying to have a spiritual experience through drugs. And what recovery now has really revealed to me is that I'm already spiritual. I'm already a spiritual being. And being clean, I'm discovering how to be how to live as like a productive human being, So it's just, for me, the whole drug experience was just like living in the world upside down, just constantly trying to grasp for something, that was not there, and just constantly chasing that. And it just feels so good not to, just to, put all that down and not have to chase any of that anymore, and to realize that I don't need anything outside of myself, to make me feel comfortable.
So Jeff, what would you say to, like, parents out there that maybe have a kid and they notice something, like what signals should they be looking for that you probably would recognize in yourself when you started really using that maybe you wish somebody had noticed and told you about it?
Well, oh man, that's a tough one. I mean, there was a lot of abuse in my house, so nobody was really looking for anything. And I mean, maybe parents should look at their, at their own relationship between, them and their spouse, and if there's, abuse, whether it's verbal or physical or whatever, just what the home environment is like.
Yeah.
And then, for me, it was a lot of isolating. So, if all of a sudden I'm the kid and I'm not talking to my mom and dad anymore about anything, and I'm not able to relate to them, and then also the friends, people who they're hanging out with, and if I'm being open with my parents about who I'm hanging out with, if all of a sudden I have a drastic change in friends,
Yeah. One of the things, Jeff, that I see is that, we talk about, drug use and spirituality and people trying to find some spirituality. To me, like, I look back at a lot of cases and a lot of people I've worked with, and including my own experience, it wasn't really always spirituality. I mean, I think that's like the catchphrase that we sort of put onto it, but a lot of it's really avoiding pain and trying to find some sort of genuine pleasure in life. And, and trying to cover up the pain, whether it be conscious and you know about it, or subconscious, and something that you haven't really, that hasn't really come out in your mind yet, is something you recognize. And then part of the journey of trying to figure out what that pain is was self-medicating with different types of drugs, or trying to fill like that feeling that was missing, because all of a sudden you related to the feeling that drug gave you. It's like, oh, you know what? This is what I want to feel. But then it only lasts for so long. And then all of a sudden you're in worse pain than you were when you started.
I really related to something you said, too, because it's something that I hear from a lot of the youth that I work with, that the spiritual piece, is just trying to find something that's meaningful to me, and that I have some sort of, reason and purpose here. Yeah. And so many young people, I mean, look at it, it's like, looking
just
for
have a connection.
Yes.
Just to have a connection, a real connection with another human being, and when you come from a negative environment growing up, you don't really have that, because you're just in fear all the time.
Well, you have a lack of trust as well.
Exactly.
I think that's so key. It's really speaking to me, because I know that one of the things we like to do, it's primary, is getting families involved, because none of these young people that we see were created in a vacuum. They're part of the system, and the system has to change, and it has to evolve. Even if it's relatively healthy, it has to keep evolving. Otherwise, it gets stale and starts to get weird. And if you had some kind of abusive background and things, it's like you finding that purpose and that meaning in your life is inspiring, and that's what I think treatment should be all about, is how to find your voice.
Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for your call, and thanks for being such a fan.
And
really
please
appreciate
go ahead and like us on Facebook. I will tell everybody to like us on Facebook, but I think it's very interesting.
I want to bring up a point, because like it's just this issue of relationships, and like it's changing so much. And the big thing that I think is changing the most is new media and the internet, and we're seeing this now, and I've been dealing with it a lot recently on the media. But the whole idea of how people interact and what they think intimacy is, and the fact that they think that their whole life should be out there on Facebook, and they don't realize there's any consequences because it's just them and a computer. I mean, how many times do people text somebody and then they're like, oh my God, what the hell did I just text that person? Right? But people are putting this stuff on Facebook, and it's everywhere, right? Yeah. And there's the way that kids and adolescents and even adults now are relating to each other is completely different. Yeah. We're becoming more and more isolated as we become more and more crowded into these cities and buildings, but yet we have this like idea that privacy doesn't matter, that there's no true intimacy. There's just like, a desire to sort of be known by everybody for everything you do, including things that I'm telling you, nobody cares what you ate for lunch.
Or where you ate at lunch.
Or where you ate for lunch.
The only reason I ever want to know when people check in at places is so where I know where not to go. So that's the bonus of like when people
it's Judas avoidism.
Yeah, it is. It's totally. But, and it goes again to, we're in Portland now. We're opening up a new station. They have an amazing festival down there called North by Northwest, right? And
it's up there.
It's up there. Yeah. And it could be down there if you're using it.
You go a long way around.
But here's the thing. How many people, and you're talking about this isolation thing, how many people are going to concerts and recording the whole concerts? The whole concert, they're literally, and I've spoken about this before, this huge pet peeve of mine, they're recording the concert on their phone, and I'm like, you're here. What exactly are you recording? Be in the moment.
I've never understood that either. What's that about?
I just don't get it. And if somebody out there could tell me what that's about, I mean, because they're basically, it's another way of saying I was here. I'm going to show you
I'm
where
involved.
I was.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit of narcissism, like saying that I'm important somehow and I'm part of something. I don't know. But that's the thing. It's a false intimacy that's not really true, and I think we're seeing more and more of that. And I think that, the internet has become such a social hub. And then the fact that people, their behavior is like more isolated, it's more addictive in general. And I think, even I have to check myself sometimes when I'm checking my phone every 5 minutes. I mean, I do get an email about once every minute, but it's like, do I really need to check it every 5 minutes? Can I not wait like at least an hour before I check to see what's going on?
To me, for some of the young people that we work with, it's kind of what the caller was talking about, that in these virtual relationships and out there in the world, there's this sense of importance and competence, and I'm bigger than I actually am in many ways, and so
based on how many fake friends you have.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me feel good, and unplugging from that when they come into treatment is really difficult for some of them sometimes. About how do I manage that again, and how do I get you get rid of the false gap between like where you actually are and where you sort of appear to be in the virtual world, and bridging that gap I think is really important.
Well, and there's companies that are exploiting it now, like Clout, where your Clout score will actually, restaurants will look up what your Clout score is, and you get a table based on your Clout score.
That's why I sit outside.
And, or you get to get into clubs.
I never get the good seat.
You always have to wait when you're with Judah.
Judah's got takeaway. What's he talking about?
Exactly. But if you just tuned in, by the way, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. The number here is 800-222-5222. We're in the studio tonight with amazing people, really. I mean, if you just tuned into the show, we're sitting here with Andrew Spanzik, who owns and operates KLEAN Treatment Center, one of the kindest people you'll ever meet in this profession, somebody that's been doing it, and I say for 28 years, and
it's going
grew
up by
5 years throughout the whole show. It's 22 years, and we're here with Jeff Nalin and Steve Sager, who is a psychiatrist and owner at Paradigm Treatment Center in Malibu for teenager adolescents. And we're with people in the studio tonight that actually care. And I think that's one of the things. I've met Jeff before, and I've known Andrew for a long time. Steve, you're still a little iffy, but I'm going by what Jeff said. And you guys care, and I think people.
What an endorsement is iffy, like
if for the first time in the show you're iffy,
just because
you
know what Freud would say about that. You have a high level of narcissism.
The one thing I can say something about Steve too, because one of the things that he's really great at is helping the kids kind of dictate what they need. He wants to hear from them and takes their stuff into account, which I think is a really important piece. I've been to KLEAN and I see how you guys work with them there, and it's like it is about empowering people to advocate for themselves, and I think that we are like-minded in that way. And especially as a psychiatrist, it's not just dictating, oh, you meet this criteria here, take this pill. It's what's going on for you, what's worked for you in the past, what do you think is going to be helpful, and helping. It's part of the therapeutic process, because it's learning how to start to advocate and think that you're a part of this treatment.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Dr. Ko is one of our partners at KLEAN. We have a psychiatrist there 3 days a week, and I've been working with him since 1991 when we opened our first company, also called Paradigm, which is kind of funny.
That is funny.
Yeah, but just having a psychiatrist involved that really understands how to do things, not just about shelling out more pills, but actually taking a little time and looking at things from a psychodynamic perspective. And we do a lot of psychoanalytic treatment as well as cognitive behavioral treatment and other sorts of.
Okay, big words, by the way. Why don't you tell people quickly what those things are?
Why don't you ask Steve?
Steve, who's the psychiatrist.
Right, he's the expert in the room.
We're talking about, I can't even remember the words he just said. No, but let's go to, we're running out of time. Let's go to Heather in Vermont.
Remember the words.
And she wants to talk about intimacy and checking in. She's welcome back to KLEAN Radio, Heather.
Thank you. I was appreciating Andrew's comment about the importance of being able to develop intimacy in sobriety, because for those who haven't listened to the show, I was saying I was going to be going through a divorce with my husband, but actually since the last time I talked to you, we've been engaged in a lot of intimate conversations, and we may eventually reconcile. I mean, we're still separated, still going to be separating our finances, but we've had a lot of really in-depth conversations, probably the most engaged and intimate conversations we've had in the entire 6 years of our marriage.
That's amazing.
That's great.
Now, let me ask you a question, Heather, since we're talking about this whole Facebook thing, because I noticed a lot of people do this. Did you talk about this stuff on Facebook, or you just kept it more private?
I kept it private.
Smart woman. And the reason I bring that up, Andrew, is because what we're talking about is once you start talking about some of these things out loud, it's hard afterwards. It's hard to...
Well, I think the goal is actually to be able to talk about things. And the fact that Heather's been able to talk to her husband, you know, is in a real relationship and actually sit down and talk about it instead of avoiding it through just spouting it out through Facebook and then getting, you know, results that you want to choose to hear what you want to hear. And the reality is that conversation and intimate relationships are painful at times, and it takes effort. It takes, you know, real work to get through and take the risk to say things that, you know, might be painful to the other person and to yourself.
Now, Heather, you're sober, by the way. So, and she's coming up on 6 years, and I want to talk about that to people. That it's amazing that you've done this sober, that you're learning to be intimate sober.
Yeah, my anniversary is actually coming up on Thursday. I'm going to have 15 years on Thursday.
15 years. Wow, happy birthday.
Yeah, 6 years it was the anniversary for a wedding.
And that, I mean, that's amazing. And so, you know, for your birthday, we're going to do something special for you, Heather. So if you could go on Facebook. Please,
now that we've been banging Facebook all night.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking you to be too intimate on it. Just share with me your size, your address, and
it's not Judah Wiener. You don't have to worry about it.
That's exactly right. But we'd love to send you a gift. So Heather, go to facebook.com/KLEAN Radio and you know, private message us.
Yep.
And I really love that Heather's been calling a lot, going through the ringer, and Andrew actually gave her amazing advice a couple weeks ago, which was part of, you know, with the finances stuff. So it's really cool that you're doing this, and we're glad you're bringing us along for the ride.
Yeah, and part of what was really helpful, going back a couple of weeks, was when Andrew was talking about shame, because I was reading a book, and I shared with my husband this person's talk about how men and women process shame differently, and my husband's like, "Yep, yeah, she's exactly right," you know. And so we got into the things that we feel shame about and vulnerable about, and it's really opened some doors up to, you know, I'm not saying, I told him there's hope for us to reconcile, but I have to see that he's able to maintain.
Well, you know, Heather, I've always said that even if you're, you know, it never hurts to sort of work through a relationship and get closure one way or the other. You know, even if a couple is going to get divorced, that almost is more of a time for them to talk about things than before they get married. You know what I mean? Because you have so much in common. You have so many things that have to be dealt with. And if you're just fighting, it's just destructive. And, you know, when people are separating, especially if children are involved, it's all the more time, I think, to get a therapist involved and work through the issues and recognize you're either going to stay together or you're not, make a decision about that, and then find a way to be civil and then deal with the issues that go along with the process of that breaking up and divorce. Because if you don't deal with it, you're just going to have a lot of resentment for a long time. And there's going to be, you know, secondary problems that will occur beyond the trauma of the actual separation itself. So, you know, really working through those issues is important.
It's true. It comes up a lot with our families, you know, because there's lots of shifts going on and sometimes it doesn't work out. But, and I say the same thing in a different way, that, you know, working out those things at the end and tying them off, whether it's going to work out or not, is how you avoid having emotional baggage later on. And so it's healthier for everybody. And it sounds like you, Heather, have, you know, started dealing with that, and whether it works out or not, you're going to sort of be a little bit cleaner from it and not have a lot of baggage left over.
Yeah, I'm feeling stronger.
That's great. Heather, you sound great. Listen, please go to that page. I don't want to say its name out loud. And please send us that thing that I need so I can get something to your house.
Yep, I will.
Thank you so much, Heather. Call us. Keep just keep us in the loop, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that's awesome. I mean, that's really, you know, to the people out there that are listening, there's hope. You know, and I sometimes think the media just doesn't show the damage sometimes. They don't show the hope.
Yeah.
You know, we know
well, they don't have time, you know. It's like, and we don't have like news anymore. We have commentators. Right. So, you know, everything on TV is just about shock value, and it's about the initial crisis. I mean, I've been seeing this with this whole DiMaggio thing I've been involved in. You know, as long as there was like, you know, gossip and news and, you know, that was related to the tragedy and whatever, it was great. As soon as like people get into the solution of grieving and dealing with the problem, the news couldn't care less. So all people see on TV day after day after day on all these different shows is just the negative. They see the sort of horrific front end of all this damage, and then they don't really ever see a conclusion. You know, you don't see the perpetrator's side of the problem. You don't see the addict's family's, damage and that resolution. You don't see, the other side of the story. There's so many other sides to these stories than just sort of like the sensationalistic, first off, somebody got kidnapped or, somebody OD'd on drugs. I mean, do we really know what, everybody jumps on the, Heath Ledger overdose, but do we really know what happened, why that happened? What did the media do to cover it after he died to show about prevention and what could have been changed, or, what influences his life led him down that path? Right. That really never gets explored.
Because we have 2 weeks of it sometimes, max.
Yeah.
We're
any story,
crisis.
if it goes beyond 2 weeks.
Well, we're in crisis. It's what are we going to do with the youth? Then 2 weeks later, everybody forgets about it. It's the same thing with the shootings, with everything. Yeah. We have 3 weeks where afterwards everybody's just panicked and worried. Yeah. Then we're done.
Well, you go from guns to drug abuse to murder to abduction, then back to guns, and then and then someone tries to tie them all together for a second, and it's just nobody really gets in depth into anything. It's really kind of sad.
And so the people out there listening, we are running out of time, but if you are going through that problem right now, and you're at that end. If you're a teen, give Paradigm a call, Jeff. I want to thank
our guest. If you're a parent of a teen.
If you're a parent of a teen, your sister, your brother, your son, anything. How do people get in touch with you?
You can call. Our website is ParadigmMalibu.com, and our phone number is 855-780-TEEN, which is 8336.
Say that one more time.
855-780-TEEN.
And I want to thank you again, Jeff. I want to thank you, Steve Sager.
Thank you.
And I got your name right the first time. You did.
And kept it right.
Don't do me like that, Steve. You might not be coming back. That's why I said he's iffy. You try to play with me. And
I think you're iffy.
I am extremely iffy. Just call me Judah Iffy. And I really want to, Andrew, you're always the best. I want to talk, we had a great show tonight. We were talking about the MDMA issues. We're talking about how do you know, about what alcoholism, how do you detox from it and all that jazz, how dangerous it is. And I just want to thank everybody out there that's listening, our fans. We have the greatest fans. I want to welcome our new station, Portland. Next week, we're going to even be bigger. We're going to be in Washington State and a couple new stations over there. And to everybody out there that's struggling, that's listening, that if you have insurance, you don't have insurance, just give us a call. The number is 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. I want to thank Steve. I want to thank Maisa. I want to thank our amazing producer, Randall. And I want to thank our other producer, Patrick, best video guy in town. And Andrew, yeah?
Thank you, Judah.
Let's thank everybody. Let's have a connect moment. Let's have that
without
intimacy.
Ecstasy.
Let's just hold hands without ecstasy, and
we just write about it on our Facebook page.
We will. We'll be posting after the show how intimate we are and how spiritual we are, and then we'll take a picture of what we're eating.
It's like a little hypocrisy to finish off the show.
There's nothing like some good hypocrisy to keep people alive. And to everybody out there, Misfortune Radio's next, and the discussion continues at KLEANRadio.com. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you or someone you care about addicted to drugs or alcohol? Addiction ruins lives and destroys families. Bring an end to the pain and suffering by calling KLEAN Treatment Centers. KLEAN has helped people from around the world break free by not only treating the addiction, but the underlying causes and providing vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean with no gimmicks and no false promises. If you need immediate assistance or just have questions, call KLEAN Treatment Centers for guidance. A much better life awaits.